She arrived at the ranch just before nightfall, dust on her hem and resolve stitched tight across her face. "I'll work," she said, standing straight despite the long walk. "Cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden, I just need a roof." The rancher studied her quietly. A scar pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent line, the mark of a fire years ago that had taken more than skin. He didn't ask why she needed shelter. He didn't ask what she was running from. He asked only one thing. "Can you stay through winter?" She nodded. "If you let me." He opened the door. That was the trade, if it could be called one at all. No promises, no ownership, just a place where the wind didn't decide whether you lived another night. Her name was Ada. She rose early and worked steadily as if movement itself kept fear at bay. She learned the ranch's quiet rhythms, the sound of hooves before dawn, the way the kettle sang when it was ready, how the scarred rancher, Jonah, paused before speaking, choosing words like tools meant to last. He never watched her work like she owed him something. When she finished a task, he nodded once, the way a man does when he respects the job, not the person doing it for him. Weeks passed, then months. Ada's hands toughened. Her shoulders loosened. The ranch stopped feeling borrowed and began to feel possible. She caught herself planning where to plant herbs, how to patch the south fence before the first freeze, and then would scold herself for hopping. One night a storm broke hard and sudden. Wind clawed at the house. The barn door tore loose. Jonah was already pulling on his coat. "I'll help," Ada said. He shook his head. "Stay warm." She didn't argue. She stoked the stove, set soup to simmer, counted breaths until the door finally opened again and he came in soaked and shaking. She handed him a towel without a word. He accepted it without pride. Later, as the storm settled into a steady hush, he spoke from his chair by the fire. "You don't have to earn staying," he said. Ada stared at the flames. "I don't know how to do that any other way." He nodded. "I didn't either. Took me a long time to learn." Spring came lean but kind. The land greened. Calves were born. Ada laughed once out loud, surprised by the sound. Jonah looked up, startled, then smiled with his eyes. Trouble found them, as it always does. A man rode up with papers and confidence, speaking of debts and arrangements and how Ada had made an offer elsewhere before coming here. Ada's stomach dropped. Jonah stepped between them. "She stays because she chooses to," he said evenly, "and because I choose her staying." The man sneered. "What does she owe you?" Jonah didn't raise his voice. "Nothing." The rider left angry and empty-handed. That night Ada sat on the porch steps, shaking. "I thought I traded myself for shelter," she said. "I thought that was all I was worth." Jonah sat beside her, the scar catching the lamplight. "You traded fear for work," he said. "That's not selling yourself, that's surviving." Silence settled, not heavy, honest. Summer filled the ranch with visitors who needed help. A boy looking for honest wages, a widow with a broken wagon. Ada found herself offering what she had been given: time, steadiness, a place to breathe. Jonah watched the house fill with life and felt something inside him mend where the fire had taken hold. One evening, he handed Ada a folded paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Deed," he said, "half." Her hands trembled. "I didn't dream this far." "Neither did I," he answered, "but here we are." They didn't marry quickly. They didn't need to. They built. They chose. When they did stand together before witnesses, it felt less like a beginning and more like nomming what already was. Years later, when people asked how it started, Ada would smile and say, "I asked for shelter." And Jonah would add, "And I learned the difference between saving someone and letting them stay." The truth was simple and rare. She traded nothing she was. He gave nothing he didn't mean. And together, they made a home where futures were allowed to grow. Not because anyone was owed, but because someone said yes. Autumn arrived with the smell of apples and dust, And with it came the quiet proof that the ranch was no longer a refuge. It was a beginning. Ada began keeping a small ledger, not because Jonah asked, but because she wanted to understand how things worked. Feed costs, repairs, what could be saved, what had to be spent. Jonah noticed the numbers lining up better than they had in years. "You've got a head for this," he said one evening, setting 2 mugs on the table. She shrugged. "I got tired of not knowing where the ground was." They worked side by side through harvest, through frost, through the long nights when the coyotes sang and the past tried to knock on the door. When fear crept back, because it always does, Ada met it differently now. She didn't bargain with it. She named it. Then she kept going. The scarred rancher changed too, though he never spoke of it. He slept deeper, laughed more easily. When neighbors came asking for help, he looked to Ada first, not for permission but partnership. Winter tested them hard. A sickness took 2 calves. A blizzard closed the road for days. One night the stove cracked and filled the house with smoke. Ada dragged Jonah outside coughing, wrapped him in blankets, and kept him warm until dawn. He watched her move with calm authority and felt something settle where loneliness used to live. "You'd have made it without me," he said hoarsely. She met his eyes. "Maybe, but I didn't have to." When spring broke the snow, the ranch felt wider than before, like it had been waiting for them to grow into it. Ada planted a garden that fed not just the house, but the hands that came through it. Jonah rebuilt the barn stronger than it had ever been, each beam a promise he intended to keep. Trouble tried one last time. The man with papers returned, older, quieter, backed by little more than habit. Ada stood beside Jonah this time, her voice steady. "There's nothing for you here," she said. "No debt, no bargain, no fear." The man looked at the house, the land, the life they'd built, and left without another word. Years passed the way good years do, busy, honest, full. Children learned to ride in the yard. Widows found work that came with dignity. Men learned that silence could be kind. On a warm evening, long after the chores were done, Jonah and Ada sat on the porch watching the sky turn copper. "I never dreamed past the next night," Ada said softly. Jonah nodded. "I stopped dreaming altogether." She reached for his hand, not as payment, not as need, as choice. "Look at us," she said. He squeezed her fingers, the scar at his mouth easing into a real smile. "We kept going." And that, more than shelter or scars or survival, was the future she'd never dared to dream. A life where no one had to trade themselves to belong. A home that asked for nothing but honesty. And a love that grew, not from debt, but from staying. The years after that settled into a rhythm so steady, it almost felt unreal. Not easy, never that, but honest. Ada became known in the nearby towns not as the woman who stayed, but as the woman who knew how to fix what others gave up on. Accounts that didn't balance, fields that wouldn't yield, people who arrived carrying more shame than belongings. She never rushed them, she never asked for their stories first. She offered work, warmth, and time. The rest came when it was ready. Jonah watched her from the edges, pride quiet but constant. The scar that once made him turn his face away no longer mattered. People listened when he spoke. More importantly, they listened when he didn't. The ranch had learned his language, patience, boundaries, presence. One summer, a young girl arrived at dusk with a sack too heavy for her shoulders. "I was told you trade shelter for work," the girl said, eyes lowered. Ada felt something tighten in her chest, not fear but recognition. She stepped forward before Jonah could speak. "We don't trade people here." The girl looked up, confused. "We share," Ada continued. "If you want to stay, you stay. If you work, it's because you choose to, not because you owe." The girl cried then, the way someone cries when a rule they've lived by suddenly breaks. That night, as the house settled into sleep, Jonah said quietly, "You changed the way this place answers the world." Ada shook her head. "You gave me the room to learn how." Age came softly to them. Jonah's steps slowed. Ada's hair silvered at the temples. They argued sometimes about fences, about weather, about when to let go, but never about staying. That was the one thing that never wavered. One evening, after a long day, Jonah sat longer than usual on the porch, watching the fields turn gold. "If I go first," he said, voice calm, "don't shrink the place." She swallowed. "I won't." "Let it keep breathing," he added. "Let it keep people." "I promise." When Jonah passed, it was in his sleep, the house quiet around him. Ada sat with him until morning, grief heavy but not hollow. The ranch woke with her. The animals needed feeding. The people needed steadiness. The future somehow still needed her. She kept her promise. The ranch didn't become smaller, it became truer. Years later, when Ada was old and the porch boards creaked beneath her chair, children would ask how it all began. She never told them about trading herself for shelter. She told them this instead: "I asked for a place to survive. Someone gave me a place to choose. And once you're allowed to choose, you can build a future you never thought you were worthy of dreaming." And when the lantern was lit each night, steady against the dark, it meant the same thing it always had. No one here is owned. No one here is temporary. And no one has to disappear to belong.